So today we're going to do a cash flow analysis. How many of you guys were here the last time we did this topic? Or at least saw the recording? See, a couple of you are still connecting. I'm going to give you guys a few minutes to kind of get situated. You don't have to turn your camera on if you don't want to. All right, I'm going to put in the chat box over here the address that we're going to be looking at today, so you guys can kind of follow along. And we're going to go through it step by step. All right, there's the address. If you guys aren't used to Zoom yet, if you just scroll to the bottom with your mouse or drag your mouse to the bottom, a menu bar will come up. On the left side is where you can turn your video and your audio on and off. And then there's also an option to chat in there. So if as I go along, if you have questions or you get lost or I skip over something, just put in there whatever your question is or tell me to stop and go back. I'm going to try to go as deliberately as I can through this so that you can see every single step and sort of see my method. But I do this pretty often. I typically probably do 2 to 3 of these a day. So I might skip over some stuff and I don't want to do that. So make sure that you guys stay with me. I'm going to share with you a couple different screens. All right. Can you all see that? All right. So we are looking at 2604 Big Leaf Drive in Killeen, Texas. And I'm going to start from the beginning. Can you guys see my browser now, or am I still on the Excel sheet?
Excel sheet.
Okay.
It's the Excel sheet, Erin.
Okay, hang on. I'll have to unshare and reshare every time I switch. So if I forget to do that, let me know. Okay, can you see my Google browser now? Okay. All right, so first thing I do when I get a property is especially if I don't know the area or I'm not familiar with the town or that address, I'm going to just go to Google, right? I'm going to check it out. So just put in the address into Google search, 2604 Big Leaf Drive, Killeen, Texas. And all I do is look at the Google imagery of the property. This looks like a pretty nice property. You can see kind of the surroundings, and there's a lot of things you can tell from this kind of imagery. You can usually see like what kind of neighbors they have, how clean the neighborhood is, if there's cars, just broken down cars, or there's 15 cars in the driveway next door. There's just stuff you can learn by looking at the actual property and then the area around it. So I kind of just do that to make sure that it's something I even want to pursue. So this looks really awesome right off the bat. And just to let you know, this came from some partners that I'm working with. They are looking to sell this in some form. So we're going to go, and I'll kind of explain more of that in a little bit. But a lot of times the property and the situation that the property is in or the seller is in helps decide the way that they get rid of that, the way that they exit. And I'll kind of show you what that means here shortly. So we looked at the, sorry, I'm not a very good multitasker. We looked at the imagery, and now we know kind of what we're looking at. So we know it's at least worth pursuing. So now we're going to start running down the actual information that we'll need to do a cash flow analysis. This is assuming you're going to buy and hold this property. You're going to keep it. You want to know that it's going to cash flow. So I think that that's step one before you even figure out really what renovations it needs, before you send a contractor out there and all of that. You want to make sure that it's going to cash flow first to make sure it's even worth pursuing, or make sure it fits your criteria to add to your portfolio. So I'm going to stop sharing again and show you the Excel document that we're going to use to analyze this. So if you are taking my course or you're one of my clients, you probably already have this document. There's a couple different tabs at the bottom. We're going to start with the second tab, which is year one return on investment. So this is going to give you a cash on cash month to month, and then we'll do a return on investment calculation at the end. So it's you pretty much just fill in the stuff that's yellow, and I'll walk you through all of that from the beginning. So the first thing we want to do is figure out what kind of income the property makes. So in the case of a single family home, that usually just means there's one monthly rent payment, and that's the extent of the income. Sometimes if you have multifamily, or if you have maybe there's like an extra storage facility, or there's a laundry facility on it, you can have income from that as well. You know, maybe your laundry facility makes you $175 a month, or maybe your storage units each rent for $50. You want to have all of that income on this document, so you can account for all of it. Katie, as to your question, this is probably not the one that you have. You probably have just this tab in your cash flow analysis document. So the rest of it is, I can send you the rest of it, but it's helps you calculate the internal rate of return, and then it helps you also plan for an exit strategy. So you've probably seen this exact tab, but not the rest of them. Okay, so you're going to go ahead and put your rent in there. So right now we've got to figure out what the rent is. And we're going to use, sorry, I'm looking at Katie's response. I got to stop sharing again and take you back to Zillow, take you back to Google to start. Okay, can you see Google again? Okay. So now we're going to try to see what we think this will rent for. And while we're here, we'll also see what it's worth, and we'll check on the taxes, so I don't have to keep going back and forth. So Zillow is a really great resource when you're looking at like macro market data and market data as a whole. It's not always estimate. It's not always accurate when it comes to an individual property because it's based on an algorithm. It could be accurate, but not necessarily. It can't really account for the condition of that individual property. It's just looking at the entire market as a whole. So just keep that in mind. You know, this estimate may or may not be accurate. Sometimes it can be way off. If it's the nicest house on the block, it's going to be way off. If it's the worst house on the block, it's going to be way off. But if it's very similar to all the rest of them, it's probably going to be pretty close. So keep that in mind. Whoops. Okay, so you're going to look at, remember when we go to do comps, when we're looking to value a property and see what the property is worth at market value, which means like, you know, repaired, livable. Sometimes they call it ARV, after repair value. Sometimes they'll call it retail price, which is basically what, you know, a retail home buyer would buy it for off the MLS. And that means it will qualify for a conventional loan, so it needs to be livable. Those aren't like, there's not like a hard and fast rule for any of those things, but that's where inspections and appraisers particularly come in. Okay, so we've got our subject property, 2604 Big Leaf Drive, Killeen, Texas. We're going to start with looking at evaluation. So we're going to go to the sold. We want to look at what has sold, because for sale doesn't mean anything besides like what the seller wants to sell their house for. That doesn't mean it's actually going to sell their house. That doesn't mean that's what it's actually going to sell for. So like a realtor can advise someone to sell their house for $150, and they might insist that it's worth $225. And the realtor has to list it at that price legally, but it's probably never going to sell at that price. So you have to get, when you're running comps and figuring out the value, you have to see what has actually sold or what's under contract. Otherwise, your numbers could be skewed. So we're going to look at just the sold. And so this property is, it was built in 2002. We need to get this property data so we can look at what comps are. So it was built in 2002. It has 4 beds, 2 baths, 18 1,267 square feet. So 4 beds, 2 baths, almost 1,900 square feet. So we want to look for comps that are similar to that. And typically when you're looking at age of the home, when you're looking in the same area, they're going to be pretty much built around the same time. You know, that's how development goes. But you have to keep track of the timelines, because even across the street, sometimes a neighborhood could be 10 or 15 years older or newer. So just make sure that you're looking at the right age and then obviously the right size. So you can kind of scroll around here. All the things in yellow, all the houses in yellow are what have sold. The ones in black, these are not on the market. These are just Zestimate numbers, you know, what Zillow thinks these properties are worth. So this one here is a 4 bed, 2 bath, 1,601 square feet. So that's kind of close, right? It's same beds and baths, but a little bit smaller. This one over here, we would expect this to be a lot smaller, right? Because this one was 127. This one's only 113. So that's because it's not even 1,300 square feet. So this one here is 4 beds, 2 baths, 1,911 square feet. Pretty similar to ours, and it's also a brick home. And it was built in 2003. And I think I said ours was built in 2002, right? So this is a pretty good comp, right? So let's use this as a comp here. So we've got 140 for one comp. And then also note that it very recently sold. So it just sold about 2 months ago. So that's good. You want to try to get most recently sold. Try not to go over 6 months if you can, but 3 months or less is even better. So let's see if we can find anything else. This one's way too small, 1,076 square feet, 1,173. 1,237. So as you're looking at comps, you're just going to have to continue to broaden your search or widen your search in order to figure out, you know, in order to make sure you're comping it out appropriately. There's no real hard and fast rule for distance from the property. You can keep them in the same neighborhood. That's ideal, but that's not always possible, especially if you're in more rural areas. So it looks like, and again, this Zillow isn't going to be your best resource for this. This is just something that all of you have access to. Your best resource for this is just to go to a realtor and have them pull data off of the MLS. So if you have a realtor on your team, you want them to pull the comps for you, and it will be so much easier for you to figure this out because they can put in all these parameters and they can pull you exact comps that match up. So you don't have to do all this part of it. Katie, to answer your question, would you want to keep it in the same school district? Yes, you would. And typically, if you're in the same neighborhood, you're going to be in the same school district. But that's a really good point, especially when it comes to renting, because rental rates in a lot of ways are affected by school district. So yes, try to keep it in the same school district. And Zillow will show you school districts too. Greatschools.org is a great resource to find school districts and their ratings. And I believe you can I think they even have maps that highlight the different school districts. Just make sure that that is up to date, and a realtor again can help you with that. Okay, so it looks like the closest comp we have here is this 4 bed, 2 bath, 1,911 square feet. So you want to check out some pictures if you can. This one has literally 1 picture, so we're not really going to know the condition of it. But you can find some stuff out just by reading the description. So it says, are you looking for space at an affordable price? Well, look no further. This 4 bedroom, 2 bath home with over 1,900 square feet will be gone in the blink of an eye. So 2 things really reach out to me in this description. It says affordable price, which means it's probably undervalued a little bit, which probably means maybe it needs some work, or it's been very well loved and is just maybe has like worn floors or whatever, but it's probably not something that was just updated. And then also it says it'll be gone in the blink of an eye. Sometimes people just write that in there, but when it's underpriced, undervalued, that's something that you can assume it's gonna kind of fly off the shelf, right? So for those 2 reasons, I think that this price is too low, and that's because I've done a little bit more analysis. I think that this one is valued. It could be up to 160. I think a safe number will be 150, and that's based on comps that were pulled from PropStream. So we don't have access to that right now, but I just kind of wanted to show you where that value came from. Okay, so now let's look at the tax record. Tax records are public record. Anyone can access them. Anyone can find out who owns this property and find out a good deal of data about the property. I don't know if you guys know that, but if you're a homeowner, all your information is public information. Like your name is going to be listed as the property owner. So just keep that in mind. I know my husband was kind of surprised when he found that out. Okay, so we'll go back to Zillow. We're going to go back to our subject property right here. So Zillow has a lot of data, like I said. You can see the property data, property facts here. This is where I found out it was built in 2002. And then if you go down, you can go to price and tax history. And this will list out your property taxes. So your property taxes last year, $2,908. So you'll need that number. So write that down. We'll put that on the analysis document here in a second. Okay, so now we're going to look at how much we think this could rent for. 2604. Zillow tends to just want to take you to the whole market. So a lot of times your address will just delete for just the town. It'll show you the town as a whole. So you might have to type it in a couple of times. All right, so now we're going to look at for rent. We're going to look at the same area. So again, we want to start small, as close to the property as we can. But as you can see, there's nothing for rent in this area. So we're just going to scroll out until we find something that's rented. And Zillow's not a great resource for rental estimates, just because it's more of a home buying platform. Rentometer is a really great resource to confirm rental rates. And of course, your property manager and your realtor are the best person to give you rental rates, because it's a little bit more than just about a number, right? For when it comes to a renter, you want to know what type of a renter, you want to know how hard it will be to get that renter. Obviously, if you're going up in price, your pool of renters is going to decrease. And so you're going to have less people that you can look to rent it. And they will be able to give you that data. They'll be able to tell you how long it'll take to find a renter like that and what quality of renter you're going to get. So just keep that in mind. I'm not seeing much here. All right, so we've got a couple. So this one here is a 3-bed, 2.5 bath, 2,100 square feet. So it's bigger, but it only has 3 beds. Remember that ours has 4. So this is $1,295 a month. Let's see when this was built. I'm not sure when this one was built, but this one looks okay. Obviously, it doesn't really look like ours. This wouldn't be a good comp if we were buying it, but rentals, they don't have to be exact. It's more like square footage, number of beds and baths. This one right here is 3 beds, 2.5 baths. This is a lot smaller, 1,274 square feet. Let's see. Okay, so this is a 4-bed, 2-bath, 1,567 square feet. So this one's even smaller, but 1,185. And let's look at one more. So here's another 4-bed, 2-bath. This one's pretty close. So this one's 1,050. So I would estimate that it would rent for anywhere from 1,050 to 1,200. So 1,050 on the low end, you know, maybe during like this time right now, maybe this was just recently rented. 1,050 on the low end, I would say, to 1,200 on the high end. So I'm going to stop sharing this. We'll go back to our analysis document and start plugging these numbers in. Okay, so let's start at the bottom. When we are analyzing a property, before you purchase it, you want to start with the most conservative or sort of the worst case scenario. So I would always underestimate anything coming in and overestimate anything going out, just as a rule of thumb. The nice thing about Excel is that you can adjust these numbers really quickly and easily without having to run a whole new analysis. So if you've ever used the Bigger Pockets calculators, those are awesome, but you have to do the whole simulation every time you change one number. So this is kind of nice to be able to adjust things. And then I use stuff like that to verify or validate the numbers that I get. So let's start with 1050 up here. We know there's no other income. It's just a single family home. Our vacancy is going to be something that our property manager needs to give us. And this is what we can expect. What percentage of the time we think that our property will be vacant and for how long. So I typically start with 10%, just because that's like every year, if you get a tenant for a year and they move out after their 1 year every time, that's about what you're going to be looking at. It's going to take you that amount of time to get the person out of it, flip the unit and get another tenant in there. It'd probably take about a month. So, but this number you want to pull from your market. You want to either find this data. You can find this on Zillow research. You can probably just Google it. What's the vacancy rate for such and such zip code? What's the vacancy rate for this neighborhood? Is the more specific you can get, the better. And then verify that with a property manager. So we're just going to leave this at 10. So your gross operating income, it then just takes your rent that's coming in and subtracts out your vacancy allowance. So you're looking at $945. Insurance, when you're looking at a landlord policies tend to be pretty inexpensive. They're covering the structure. You want your tenant to have a renter's policy that will cover everything within the house. So for this property, I would say a high estimate for this is probably $70 a month. Property taxes, we said, were $29.08 annually. So we want to figure out what that is month to month. So I'm just going to take that $29.08 divided by 12. We're looking at $242.33. Repairs and maintenance, this number is something that depends largely on your confidence level, your comfort level, and then also on the state of the property. So you're going to see in a minute, we're going to plan to put a little bit of work into this property and upgrade it. So if you've updated the major systems, if it has a newer roof, it has a newer HVAC system, you can probably keep this fairly low at a minimum 10%. This is the money that you're going to hold on to every month to carry and build up your capital expenditure account or your repair fund. If you are buying a really distressed property, or maybe the roof is 28 years old and the HVAC is 12 years old, the water heater is 15, you're probably going to want to up this a little bit. And that just kind of comes with experience and mostly comfort level. Lawn care in this case, since it's a single family home, it would just be covered by the tenant. So unless, of course, the tenant asked for you to cover lawn care, I've had that happen before. People don't want to deal with lawn care, and I just tack the price of that on top of their rent. And sometimes this is actually convenient because if you have like an HOA that's pretty strict about their lawn care, if you're managing it or your property manager is managing it, you know that it's getting done. So it gives you a little bit of peace of mind. But for a single family home, typically that number is 0. Even if your tenant wants it, you're going to add it on top of the rental rate. Trash, also for this particular home, will be covered by the tenant. You sometimes will pay for that depending on the situation or with a multifamily. Management is going to be typically 10% of the monthly income. That's just kind of the going rate. The more doors you have, the lower this number can be, and this is always negotiable. What tends to vary is the amount that it costs you to have your property manager find you a tenant. I've seen it anywhere from a flat rate of $175 or $250. Like in rural Tennessee, that's about what I pay. Some places in the Northeast will take 3/4 of a month's rent just to find a tenant. So just make sure you know that what that cost is. Some will charge you higher if they're only finding you a tenant and then they're self-managing. So just make sure you know all that before you sign a contract with your property manager. But I would assume 10% on a month-to-month basis. So you're looking at $522.33 for total expenses. So this just automatically calculated just added all of these expenses together. So now you're looking at, you're bringing in $945 and then $522.33 is coming out every single month in expenses. So you're left with $422.67. So the next thing you have to consider is your mortgage. So most properties would have a mortgage. If you pay cash for property, you're not going to have a mortgage. But there's a couple considerations here. You typically, if you go to get your mortgage from a bank, a conventional lender, they're going to escrow it's going to be called a PITI statement: principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. But note that we already have taxes and insurance up here in rows 14 and 15. So if you go to get that number and if you end up putting in a number here for your mortgage payment that has that full PITI, you're going to be accounting for insurance and taxes twice. So down here, you only want to have your principal and interest, or if you want to put your whole payment, just make sure that you zero these out so you're not accounting for that twice. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. Okay, so now we are going to figure out, we're going to go to this fourth tab, loan amortization. So amortization is just a fancy word for mortgage pay down. So that's your principal decreasing every month as you pay it off. Obviously, that's the catch there, right? You've got to pay it off. So if you don't know this, when you look at amortization, in the beginning, you're going to be paying mostly interest. And at the end, you're going to be paying mostly principal. So for a 30-year mortgage, you're going to be paying mostly interest until 15 years. And at 15 years is when it's going to switch over to being mostly principal. So when you hear the term a heavily amortized loan, that means that it's been paid down for a number of years, probably past the halfway point, and now it's becoming more of a principal payment, which means your net worth is going up every month as you pay it down. So when you're looking at like a subject to, and you're going to take over someone's mortgage, if you can get something that's heavily amortized, then you know that every month that you pay it down, you're paying down more of your principal, which obviously is ideal for the investor, right? Because you're getting more equity in that property every month. In the beginning, you're most of the money is going to the bank and going back in interest. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, so our loan amount on this one. So we haven't talked about purchase price yet, but let's say we estimated that it's worth $150. So we're going to say that we're paying $150 for it. If this is an investment, you're going to be putting in 20% down, right? A single family home, one door, basically 4 doors or less, you're going to anticipate putting 20% down. A commercial property over 4 doors is going to be at least 25% down. Typically, this is if you go with a conventional lender, if you have good debt to income and you have a good credit score. These numbers change just as your interest rates change. So it's also just going to depend on how the bank assesses the risk of that property. So again, it's not a hard and fast rule. There's a lot that goes into originating a loan, but we're just going to assume for this case that you're putting 20% down. So $150,000 purchase price. And with a 20% down means that your loan balance is going to be 80% of that, right? So you're going to be bringing $30,000 to closing in the form of a down payment, and your loan is going to be for $120,000. So that's your beginning loan amount, $120,000. Hopefully your annual interest rate is not 8%. I'm not sure why this number is in here. Right now, a good commercial rate is about 5. If you can get better than that, great. Obviously that's variable and changes all the time, particularly lately, they've been changing a lot. If you're going with a conventional loan, you're going to have a 30-year amortization typically. Hopefully it'll be fixed, especially if you're confident in your rate. If you have an adjustable rate mortgage, which doesn't usually happen on single family homes, more so on commercial, that would be okay, I think, if you were at something like an 8% and you wanted it to get better. But if you thought you were at the bottom, you probably don't want an adjustable rate mortgage because you just don't know what's going to happen in 5, 10, or 8 years. Whenever the adjusted rate can happen, you could be again in the middle of a black swan event, or you could be at the tail end of it when interest rates go way up or something like that. So I like to stay away from adjustable rate mortgages because they're just, you just don't know what's going to happen in the future. And it's hard to really figure out what your cash flow is going to look like when you don't know what your mortgage payment is. So just kind of a little tidbit there. So 30-year amortization, 12 payments per year. So I'll just kind of show you how this plays out right here. This is by year. So you can see in the beginning, you're paying on your total your total payment for the first payment will be $644. 144 of that is going to principal, and 500 of that is going to interest. So you're paying mostly interest in the beginning. You scroll down here, we'll go to year 15. At this point, your payment still stays the same, and your principal now is $491, and your interest is $152. So you can see how that changes over time. That's where that amortization comes in. So our payment now is $644.19. So we're going to go back to our tab 2 and put that in. And again, that is just principal and interest. When you get a quote from your bank, it's probably going to be the taxes and insurance included as well. So now if we go to cash flow, so we had $422.67 in operating income, and then we're taking away every month $644 toward our mortgage. So we're left with a negative $221.52. So I'm assuming nobody wants to buy this property right now because you're in the hole, right? I hope that's your answer. I hope you're not okay with negative $220 every month. So what we can do is go and adjust these as we talked about before. We knew we were on the low end of our estimates. So we said $1,050 to $1,200 a month in rent, right? So let's change this to $1,200. So now we're bringing in $1,200. Let's say we find out that really we're looking at like an 8% vacancy, and that's confirmed by a property manager, which should be the case in this particular area. We go and we get an actual insurance quote, and we're really at 65. We can't change the property taxes. We don't have any say over that. We're going to leave this at 10%. But as you can see with the rental rate going up, that went up as well. So you could even lower this to 100, whatever you feel comfortable with. And now let's say we've talked with our property management company. We showed them what we're working with. We can't cash flow on this property. So they're like, okay, I'm going to agree to 8%, or maybe you own more than one door. So that number can go down. So now you're left with $503 in expenses. So your expenses have gone down, your income has gone up. So your total operating income is $600, but you're still left with a $44 loss on a month-to-month basis. So anybody have any ideas what you can do at this point? Is there anything you can do to maybe like increase the income or add value to the property? Maybe, right? You can maybe figure out how to bring in more income. You can maybe figure out how to up that rent. Yeah, so that's right. So repairs, that's what we're going to look at next. Hang on, I'm trying to keep up with the chat box over here. Yeah, so a fence or a patio, that's right. Something on the inside, some kind of upgrade. You can definitely potentially increase the value of that property, or increase the amount of money that a renter is going to pay. So we're going to look at that now. So we're going to go over to the flip tab. Can you guys see the flip tab now? Okay. All right, so we have our property data up here at the top. Square footage 1867, 4 beds, 2 baths, built in 2002. So current list price on this one is $105. So this one's being sold for $105,000. And this scenario that we're going to run right here is a hard money scenario. So I know, you don't know yet, that this property needs a little bit of work. It probably will easily qualify for a conventional loan, I would say. But we're going to assume that you get in there with hard money and you refinance it afterward, because that's going to be more expensive than just getting a conventional loan up front. So if the numbers work there, then you know for sure that they'll work getting a conventional loan. So I know that it needs about $19,000 in renovations. And I can share that with you guys. We're already at 740, so I don't want to go into specifics. But a contractor walked the property, said it needs about $19,000 on the high end in repairs. So I always build in a rehab buffer that kind of already has a buffer in there because it's the top end of it. So we're just going to bring that down to 0. Maybe really the number is like $16K, and that gives you that buffer anyway. So now you know the total loan amount, if you're using a hard money, is $113,500, because a hard money lender will give you money for the purchase and the renovation, and then you just take out your down payment. So in this case, I have 10% built into here. There, again, this isn't really a hard and fast rule. It's not like you're going to put 10% down for every hard money loan. It depends on the property. It depends on what percentage of ARV the purchase price is. There's a lot that goes into it. So it's very property specific. So you'll have to, when you do, it's not like when you're getting a conventional loan, you just go and get a pre-qualification letter that gives you what you can pay and what your interest rate is. It doesn't work like that. You have to bring the property to your hard money lender and share with them the details of that property, and they'll decide based on that property what they're going to give you. So probably a conversation for another time, but if you're looking into using hard money and you want to know the ins and outs of that, let me know. I can help you with that. So the going rate for hard money is 12% annual interest, and they're typically interest only loans. And so 12% annually turns out to 1% a month. So every month you're paying 1% of that loan in interest. So if your loan is $113,500, you're paying $1,135 every month in interest. Typically the term is 6 months. Sometimes you can add a couple months on the tail end for a penalty. And you're also going to pay 2 to 3 points on the front side for that money. So a point is 1% of the loan. So 1 point is 1% of the total loan. So in this case, we're going to assume 2.5 points because you're going to get anywhere from 2 to 3. So we'll just go somewhere in the middle. So that cost is $2,833. So that's or $2,838. That's your cost of money. That's an expense that you can never get back. You can never recoup. Same with this monthly interest payment. This number down here in row 17 is assuming your term is 6 months and it takes you the full 6 months to pay back that loan. So whether you renovate, refinance, or rent and then refinance, or if you sell it, let's just assume worst case scenario, it takes you 6 months. So that's really 5 months of payments because you won't make a payment on your first month. So you multiply that $1,135 times 5, and you end up with $5,675. So that's typically that's a carrying cost, or something that you, like a holding cost, something you have to pay every month. And again, you're never going to get that back. So a huge drawback of hard money. It's easy to get the money and you can get it quickly with very little like background credit check, but it's costly. So a builder's risk policy, you're going to get a builder's risk policy typically in this case. That's what the builders use or flippers use because it's fairly inexpensive. And it's basically liability coverage, and it will cover you only while construction is happening. Once you are done with construction, if you have a tenant, you can switch over to a renter's policy. If you do not have a tenant, you're going to have to go to a vacant policy, which can get really very expensive. Jennifer, to answer your question, when would you recommend going the hard money route? When you can't get into a property conventionally, when it doesn't qualify for a conventional loan because it's too distressed, then you're going to pretty much have to use hard money. That's sort of where that business model came from. Or if you can't qualify and you can't get the money in any other way, hard money is a really easy way to do it. If you're planning to flip it, that's a good strategy. But if you're planning to rent and refinance, you need to make sure that you can qualify for a loan on the back side. And that's something you want to do prior to purchase, because you don't want to be stuck in a property. You don't want to be stuck with this hard money loan, because if you can't sell it, then you're probably going to be foreclosed on. Because your expenses are going to be too high to rent it out. As you can see, this monthly interest payment is about what you can rent this property for anyway. So you're not going to be able to cover all the additional expenses of property management, taxes, and you're also not paying down your mortgage every month. So you're sort of just stuck. Hard money is a very short-term option. But again, it kind of depends on the property. If you can, like in this case, if you can get conventional money right from the beginning and get that $640 payment in the beginning, that would be ideal, because you're not paying closing costs twice, and you're not having to deal with the process of refinancing. So builder's risk policy, in this case for this property, I would say $400 to $450, and that's just based on experience. That's a 6-month policy. Taxes, we said, I think was $29.08. So we know we're going to hold on to this for 6 months. We're still on the hook for that the taxes the whole time that we own the property. So we're just going to divide that by 2. So we're left with $1,454 in taxes just for the time that we're looking to renovate this property. Miscellaneous expenses, you can throw anything you want in there. I just kind of like to give myself a little bit of a buffer. If it's a lower price property, I'll put $500. If it's a higher price property, I'll throw $1,000 in there just to, again, overestimate and plan for any sort of craziness that might come at closing. Closing costs are, again, variable. It depends on the situation with property. It depends on the title company. It depends on a lot of different things. At this price point, I would assume 3%. It's not necessarily a percentage. A lot of these costs are fixed, but I would just get this number from the title company. If you're considering buying a property, find out exactly what those closing costs are going to be. So we're going to go down and figure out what we can sell this property for. So we said originally 150. Your exit strategy, the changes are going to, or the costs here are going to change based on what your exit strategy is. So if you're selling this house, if you're choosing to renovate it and then sell it, or just what's known as a flip, you are going to pay typically 6% commission on the back side. So that's 3% to the buyer's agent and 3% to your agent, the seller's agent. The seller pays for all of that. These numbers are negotiable. They're not always 3%. You might have somebody, a realtor on your team that's okay with doing 2% because you give them consistent properties to sell, or you give them consistent leads or consistent referrals. But just keep in mind that, like, a good realtor, in order to pay for the marketing and to do everything that they need to do, it's probably going to be 3%. And another thing is, if you say, I see a lot of builders, a lot of times will put that they're going to pay the buyer's agent 2.5%. That's an option too, but it might deter realtors, real estate agents, from showing your property. So weigh that when you're considering that. Like, is it worth that extra 0.5% to not have people looking at your property? Obviously, if people aren't looking at your property, they're not going to buy your property. So you have to kind of weigh the pros and cons there. And your realtor can help you with that data, figuring out what effect that would have, and then also figuring out how long it would take you to sell. So sale closing costs on this, I just put 2% in here. Typically the closing costs are going to be, again, around 3%. It's not really going to change, but some markets, it's customary for the seller to pay a lot of these closing costs. Like my main market in Clarksville, Tennessee, it's customary that the seller pays most of the closing costs, and you can anticipate that that's going to be around 3%. Again, totally negotiable. It's not something that you are required to cover, but you want to find out what the sort of tradition custom is in that market, so you know what your worst case scenario is. So I pretty much always just assume that I'm going to pay 2% in closing costs. And there's ways around, like, there's ways to kind of deal with this too. So maybe somebody will come and, in this particular case, will offer you $150,000 and ask you to pay $3,000 in closing costs because maybe they don't have the cash. You know, maybe they're using a VA loan, or maybe they're getting down payment assistance and they just don't have the cash to get into a property. An option that you have is to raise the price. You can counter that offer and say, we'll sell it for $153,000 and cover $3,000 in closing costs. And then that $3,000 comes out of your proceeds and it doesn't come out of their pocket. So there's different strategies that you can utilize there to make it work for everyone. Sometimes your buyer will ask for a home warranty if you're selling it. One second. But that's not a given. They have something they want to ask for. And sometimes you can even put that in the listing as a way to get it to sell quicker. So once you pay for all of that stuff, let's say you sell for $150,000, let's put this at 6%. You're paying 6% in commissions, so $9,000. You're left with $138,000. Remember that you put $113,500 down. That was the total hard money loan amount. And so you're left with a net profit of $24,500. But you brought this $6,438 to closing in the form of down payment, and then you also have the holding costs. So you're left with a net profit of $11,937. That's if you flip it. So now again, we can adjust some of these numbers. Let's say you can sell it for 160, which I think is more accurate. And then let's say you can get your rent. So now we're looking at a net profit of 21,000. With a tax, you're going to have a pretty high tax burden. Excuse me, on a flip. There's no, you don't get any of the benefits that you get from holding property. So you're going to pay kind of the max taxes on that. So keep that in mind. I always kind of put a 25% factor in there. But we'll just talk right now net profit before taxes. So 21.1, that's if you raise the price to 160. Let's also say you can decrease your rehab down to 17,000. So now you just went up to 23,000 net profit. So keep that in mind. You can mess with some of these numbers. And let's say you get a property that you just really want to do for some reason. Like you might love the area. It might be a great school district, a perfect property for renters, just the sweet spot that you're looking for. But you just can't make the numbers work. Maybe your rehab is too high. Go back to your contractor and say, hey, what can we do to get creative on this? There's different ways you can save some money. You can, if you're selling it, maybe you want to do butcher block countertops, which are kind of trendy right now, way less expensive than like Formica or, obviously granite or quartz or something like that. So there's other ways you can save money. You can like buy appliances on Facebook Marketplace and maybe save a couple $1,000s. So just keep that in mind. There's other ways you can go about saving money on a flip. And then also know that, pretty much 100% of the time that you're doing a flip, you're going to come across something that's totally out of left field or something you weren't prepared for. And so the way that I've been able to pretty much salvage any flip that I've done is knowing that like your budget isn't really an option, right? You set a budget. This is what you need to make money. If you go over here, you need to come under here, right? So maybe your electrical went way over. So, you needed to rewire the breaker box. So now when you were going to put in ceiling fans in every room, but you don't have the money to do that. So now you just do, one light fixture. But there's ways to do that. So just keep in mind that unless you want to just completely blow the budget and throw out your profit, if something goes up or something unexpected happens, you've got to try to see if you can make up for that somewhere else. All right. So we are going to go back. I'm going to show you, we don't have too much more time, and I know I haven't even given you guys a chance to answer questions, but I really want to show you this internal rate of return. So this is a way to calculate your rate of return over time. So it's really good for a long-term buy and hold strategy. And you can see, you know now what you're going to cash flow every month, but this shows you the equity that you're getting in the house. So as you pay down your mortgage and as your property appreciates, your equity is going up every month. And then it's also going to show you the tax benefits that you're going to get from it. So the way I calculate internal rate of return is it's cash flow, depreciation, and appreciation. And then you'll also see that the rent is going to go up too, sort of with inflation, but just naturally over time, your rent's going to go up. There are other ways to calculate this, but that's just the way that I do it. Or there's other factors you can consider, but I'm going to show you. So we know that when we buy the property in year one, can you guys see this, my IRR tab? Okay. In year one, we know that it's $150,000 property. We put down $30,000, right? So our year one loan amount is going to be $120,000. So that means we have $30K in equity. So that, basically our equity at this point is only what we paid into it. Let's say that the property value is actually 160, which is what I think it is. We put a $30,000 down payment on it, and our year-end loan amount is 120, but we suddenly have $40,000 in equity, right? So you just got $10,000 in extra equity just because you bought right. You bought it at the right price. So that's where it's important to buy right and buy at the right time. So we're going to put our gross rent up to $1,200. We're going to take our vacancy down to 8%. Property management, we're going to put it 8% again. Property taxes, let me make sure that came over right. Yep, $242.33. Insurance came over. I'm not sure if there's an HOA in this neighborhood, but it's something we'd have to double check. And then we don't have any miscellaneous expenses. So we're left with net operating income of $700.67. We know our loan payment was, what do we say, $644.19. So pretty minimal cash flow in the beginning, but that's okay. I'm going to show you how that plays out here in a second. Annual cash flow of $677.72. That's just obviously that monthly payment times 12. So you can see how that plays out every month. I typically shoot for like $3,000 a year per door. So try to get $250 to $300 per month in cash flow. That's sort of my threshold. But again, there's other situations that I will take less than that if I think the property is going to appreciate, or I know I can get a really solid tenant in there, or maybe it's a place I want to live in at some point. So there's different reasons that you would put that. So Erin asked, is there a reason you chose the $250 amount? Yes, that is just based on what I want to do with my portfolio over time. I want to make $3,000 per year to meet my goals. And that's when I started out in the Clarksville area. That's what a good return on investment is. So you need to, given what the type of property I typically shoot for, like a B-class property in a great neighborhood, good school district. And that's just what a good return looks like there. And that price point is like $220 to $250 for purchase. So you want to figure that out based on your market. So you have to really analyze your market to find out what a good return is for that market. And I can help you with that. Okay, so again, our loan balance is $120,000. Over the course of this year, we're going to be paying down $1,770 in principal. So our ending balance at the end of the year is going to be $118,000. So once you take that cash on cash, that $677, and you add to that the principal reduction, you're looking at an increasing the equity in the home by $2,448. And then when you go to do your taxes, you can depreciate that. You could depreciate over a 39-year period. So you sort of get a tax, it basically alleviates your tax burden. So I think sometimes it's a tax credit, sometimes it's a benefit. It depends on the year. 39 years, Erin, is just what the IRS says you can depreciate your property over. That's just the current rule, and it can change, but you just can appreciate real property over a 39-year period. Don't ask me why, because I don't know. That's the rule. So once you look at your cash on cash, your principal, and your tax benefit there, you're looking at $4,077. So your equity is going to go up. That initial, that 40,000 plus that number there. Let me see real quick. Okay. And then you're also going to assume that your property value is going to increase every year, right? If you're buying right, you should assume that your property is going to appreciate. Don't bank on this because it's not a given. It's not going to happen 100% of the time. Like right now, we're probably going to see a little bit of dip in property value. But in the history of the world, all land across the planet has appreciated at like 3.9% year after year. So I just assume a 3% return. That's pretty conservative and something you can bank on. So you see the value of this property every year is just going up 3%. And then you only pay your down payment once. If you, like on year 5, went and did a refinance and you had to put money back into it, you would obviously like retally all this. But that, down payment, hang on one second. Sorry. Okay, so that down payment, you shouldn't, if you keep that 30-year loan, you shouldn't have to mess with that. And you can see that your loan amount is going down every single year because you're paying it down, or your tenant really is paying it down. So you see your equity growing. Does everybody see that? You guys following me? Row 4. Okay, so your equity is going up in the house. So your property value is going up and your equity is going up as your principal principal amount is going down. And then also your rent is going to go up as well. So you can figure out what the rental appreciation is expected to be in your market, but a good assumption is probably 3%. And you can just see how this goes up over time. So this only goes out to 15 years. But we bought this property for 160, or we bought it for 150, right? It was worth 160. After 15 years, it's worth $242,000. And you owe $85,000 on the loan. And so now you have $156,000 in equity, which is more than what it initially cost, more than what it cost you in the beginning. And your tenant is paying for that. So that's really where the power of real estate comes into play over that long term if you're choosing to buy and hold. So that wraps up that part of the presentation. Is everybody following, or does anyone have any questions on any of that? No specific questions? Okay, so that was kind of fast and furious. Bye, Katie. Thank you for coming. So yeah, just keep, I'm probably going to do this cash flow analysis every couple of weeks, because it's something you just have to repeat over and over and over again. You know, that took us a solid hour to go and look up all that data. If you know the market and you kind of know what the vacancy looks like, you know what you're going to pay your property manager, you have a good idea of the rental rates. That happens so much more quickly. And then Erin, back to your question about like, how do you know what a good return is? Once you know what a good return is for your market and what you want to see in a return, that helps you sort of just throw away properties much more quickly. So like if I knew from the beginning that I wanted to make $3,000 a year off of a property and I'm only getting it to cash flow $100 a month, I don't have to go any further than that, right? I know that's not my property. There are plenty of properties, plenty of deals. You know, you don't have to buy any deal. And that's why I think it's important that you figure out what your criteria is. And all of my criteria is based on what is behind me right here. Like, but this is my 10-year plan for number of properties and income. As you can see, it's going up and up as I buy more properties, as those properties appreciate. And these are my goals. And so I don't have time for a property that doesn't help me reach those goals. It doesn't help me move closer to those goals. So the $3,000 is partially what is good for that market, reasonable for that market, or doable in that market. And then also what I need to do to make it worth my time and make it worth, you know, pursuing and adding to my portfolio. So hopefully that makes sense. This is something I help all of my clients with when they go through my course. We start in the beginning, we get really, really foundational, and we figure out what it is that we're working toward, what our why is, our motivation, just like dig really deep to figure out what the point is, right? Because otherwise, when things get hard, you're just going to throw in the towel. I can even tell you when coronavirus hit and I saw that one of my flips got hit $30 a square foot, I was pretty bummed out. And I was like, maybe this isn't the industry I should be in right now. And I looked at this and all this stuff in front of me and realized like, I'm going to get through this. It's going to be fine. I'm going to overcome and buy some good things right now and make some money now. And that's what kind of keeps you grounded and keeps you moving forward. So that's where we start with my coaching programs. And then we'll get into analyzing a market, building a team sort of concurrently. The two kind of go hand in hand. You heard me say like your property manager will verify this, your realtor will verify this, your contractor will help you with this. So you're going to be building the team as you analyze your market, and they both, you know, facilitate each other. And only then, once you know the market, once you know what your criteria are, once you know what you're looking for, can you really start looking at individual properties. So that's a very long way to get around how I got to my return thresholds. And then for flips, I typically won't do anything less than 10% for like a cash on cash return, assuming that it is pretty much a sure thing. Like it'll sell really quickly and easily. There's lots of people that would buy it. But if it gets riskier, my threshold will go up to 25%. So I won't even consider a high risk property or an A-class property if it's not going to bring me at least the potential to get a 25% return on investment. Part of that came from experience. And then part of that again is just based on what I'm trying to do here. So all things I can help you with in my course. I'm going to send out some notes following this meeting with some resources you can use to help you with this analysis and some more information on my course. And if you have any questions, just reach out to me directly. If you want me to help you analyze a property, help you analyze a market, just let me know. You'll get my email address, obviously, with that follow-up. And if nobody has any questions, I'm not sure you can hear the epic meltdown that's happening outside my door right now with my two